just giving you a very brief summary. More teams and more reports are coming out today that teams like North Carolina, and obviously we knew about Florida State asking for $120 million to get out of their contract. But, Joe, it looks like more that their Florida State AD has been talking with ESPN, and it looks like it's more like $300 million that they would have to pay to get out of it. But it looked like ESPN might give them $150 million to get out of it, which I thought was interesting.
I don't know where they have that money. I don't know where that money's coming from.
Dude, I mean, the truth though is, Joe, they're making billion. They're giving a 30% revenue share to 14 teams in the SEC, and they're giving them $50 million a year. Think about that for just a minute, okay?
Right. It's just perplexing that like you hear how much they're struggling, but at the same time, then
well, did you hear? So the national championship game, that's ESPN, ABC, whatever. Did you know? AT&T, as an example, gave like close to like $500 million for the Avenue, like for that game, because that's their market target value. Dr. Pepper gives like close to $500 million a year. You remember, like, like the those stupid commercials in like college football, like Fansteel, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact, so like Northwestern Mutual, a financial advising company, they've given multiple, like they gave, what was it, the March Madness, they gave $1 billion for 2 years, $1 billion for 2 years to be the mainstream sponsor. Nevertheless, the ACC, North Carolina, all these other teams are trying to negotiate their deal to stay a conference. Let me tell you something. You know that I don't have a lot of, like, I'm not a big Notre Dame guy. I don't really love Notre Dame. It's made my hatred for them even more since Brian Kelly came to LSU, just throwing that out there.
Okay.
But Notre Dame could save the ACC. They could save them. ESPN would match the SEC deal. I'm telling you, they would match it, or maybe not match it. They would come extremely close to that SEC deal if Notre Dame entered. I fully believe that.
But it's just not going to happen. If they turn down the possibility to join the Big Ten, which is...
Do we know that they have?
I mean, they would have joined. That was something that was talked about the whole offseason, is that the Big Ten is actively and really badly wants Notre Dame to join the conference. And it makes more sense in my eyes for them to join it because it's better competition. It is a much bigger and better audience. There is more deeper and more competitive teams than in the ACC. So if they're unwilling to go to the Big Ten, I don't know why they would commit to joining the ACC. They've already got their own independent deal with NBC, which makes it complicated.
I think the Big Ten is really crowded, okay, extremely crowded. And I think that for whatever if you believe me on this or not, Notre Dame feels more like an ACC program than a Big Ten one.
I push back on that because regionally they make more sense in the Big Ten. But
regions mean nothing now.
They play in the Big.
When you got USC flying out to Ohio State for a week 2 matchup, screw me with the regions.
The Big Ten, Notre Dame already plays in it for hockey. And at the same time, the Big Ten just signed the deal that they have with NBC. So there's already like loose connections
in the ACC for basketball and baseball.
That's the only connection that they have. And that was a while ago when they have that loose affiliation that they built with them. I think with the way that things have shaped up and the way that things have changed, and now that there are bigger entities joining the Big Ten, if they do join a conference, why would they be the biggest shark in a pond full of little fish?
They're not a big shark now. The truth be told,
wait. In terms of being one of the most valuable brands in college football, they are.
No, they're not. I got some stats for you. No, they're not.
Where do they rank? They're top 5.
No, they do not. Joe, believe it or not, they rank 25th.
What ranking are you going off of?
I'm going based off of TV revenue, sites, and how much money that they're portraying from ad sales, and not only ad sales, portraying off of, and probably the biggest thing, attire, like jerseys and things like that. Joe, they rank 25th in that category. Do you want to know something whopping? The Pac-12 teams this year got paid by ESPN $10 million more this past year than what Notre Dame makes from NBC.
Well, which is atrocious, which is why that they shouldn't be committing to that independent rights deal with NBC. It's not beneficial as it used to be in the past. But I push back on that being I wouldn't really necessarily include the TV rights deal in their value. They're still a top 5 brand in terms of them being a nationally watched and followed brand
But they're
in
not,
college
though,
football.
Joe. They're
Yes, they
not.
are.
Joe, they
There
do
are
not
so
have,
few
they do not have
programs
a top 10 watch game this in the last 3 seasons. I went and looked it up.
because they've been overrated. They've been incredibly
But
overrated.
you know who else has been overrated? Texas has been overrated, and Alabama versus Texas was massive. They're not generating. Here's the reason why, too. People don't necessarily watch NBC for football. Okay. Like this is really, literally, like, I'm not, Joe, hold on. Let me get to page 2. This is like, I'm not making this up. Like, this is something that we know. So, for whatever it's worth, you can say Notre Dame has their own brand. Yes, they do, but so does everybody else. There are so many other teams that could go independent that would have more revenue than them. And it's not as if Notre Dame's been losing. With all due respect, they've gotten to multiple playoff appearances. This isn't, and here's what's something even more crazier, Joe.
Uh-huh.
Did you know that somebody told me, now I'm running this down, that ESPN pays you an X amount for making the playoff? Let me give you an example. LSU and Alabama in 2018 for Alabama and 2019 for LSU. This is the last time that we have these records or whatever. And Clemson, you can add Clemson to that. They made an average of $67 million to their athletic department for winning the national championship. So what is it that other teams are getting to just make the playoff? That's a question that I have. Now, I can't look up at Notre Dame because they're a private institution. I can't do a public records request. But my only thing is ESPN, let's just say hypothetically, Joe, they made $30 million to play in the playoff. Joe, they literally made more money in one game in a playoff for ESPN than they did NBC.
I understand what you're saying with the TV rights deal. It doesn't benefit them anymore. My point is that just from a recognizable brand standpoint, it has been a nationally followed brand. It is one of the few brands in college football that has fans in California, in the Midwest, on the East Coast. It is one of the very few that I would argue is capable of saying that they fit that criteria. There are other rankings that you can pull up as the biggest brands in terms of social media following, XYZ. Notre Dame is at the top of those lists. There is a reason why that they are highly sought after. I would also argue that what you're saying about the ACC, I think that them joining this loose affiliation with the ACC and scheduling has hurt them because they're consistently playing shit competition and weak opponents. That is what's driving down the value of those games that you're talking about, is that they're not beating anyone and putting up any competitive fights against anyone. You put them in the Big Ten, it is must-watch football having to go up against Michigan. When they played Michigan consistently, that was a huge game every single year. When they play USC consistently, I think you add UCLA into the mix, Ohio State into the mix. They need to join a conference that has more notoriety. That's my whole point. They're not going to join the ACC. They are a brand more than any other available brand to join one of these conferences for them to expand. They're at the top of the list, I think, for anybody. If any conference could add a team right now, they would all pick Notre Dame because they know the value of it.